Raped. Strangled. Left in a trash can. That's the fate of 8-year-old Lily McIntyre. Her only mistake was trusting her own grandfather. Many believe that time heals all wounds and the gift of forgiveness has taught us to never burn bridges. But what if some bridges are better off as ashes? March 23, 2024, Punta Gorda, Southwest Florida witnessed a gruesome murder. An innocent child, raped and killed by her own grandfather, a man who was supposed to love and protect her. A monster hiding in plain sight. Her name was Lily McIntyre. From the moment she was born, she was special. Not in the way most parents describe their children, but in a way that made her stand out, that made people stop and take notice. She was quiet as a baby, barely cried, and would often stare up at the ceiling as if she were seeing something no one else could. Her mother, Sarah, loved her dearly, but she couldn't help but notice how different Lily was from other babies. Lily was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. It wasn't an easy journey for Sarah. But when the doctor confirmed what she had already suspected, she felt an overwhelming sense of love and protectiveness toward her daughter. Lily was not broken. She was just different, and Sarah vowed to give her the best life possible. But little did she know that promise would be broken just right years later. Lily was indeed special. She struggled with conversations, eye contact and loud noises. Autism came with its challenges, but Sarah was there for her daughter every step of the way. Lily had trouble expressing emotions. She didn't like being touched unexpectedly, and she often flapped her hands when she was excited or overwhelmed. She struggled with certain sounds, but despite these challenges, she was greatly loved. Especially by her grandfather, Henry. Sarah had never been close to her father. Their relationship had been strained for years, built on misunderstandings and past mistakes neither of them had been able to move past. But when Henry met Lily, something changed. He adored her from the very first moment. Maybe it was the way she looked at him with curious eyes, or the way she held on to his finger when she was a baby. Whatever it was, Henry found himself drawn to his granddaughter in a way he never expected. Lily, in return, loved her grandfather. Unlike most people, he never tried to change her. Henry would tell her stories about the past, about his childhood, and though she rarely responded, he knew she was listening. And when she did speak, she always had something profound to say, as if she had been thinking about it for hours before saying it aloud. Jake, her older brother, was protective of her. At school, he made sure no one bullied her, and at home, he helped her with things that were difficult for her. Even though she didn't always understand emotions, she understood love in her own way, and she loved Jake dearly. But Lily had struggles that were hard to deal with. One of her fixations was tying her own shoes. It wasn't that she didn't understand how, it was that her hands wouldn't cooperate. The fine motor skills required were difficult for her, and every time she tried, she would end up frustrated, sometimes hurting herself in the process. It was something Sarah had tried to help her with for years, but Lily would always end up in tears. One evening, after another failed attempt, Lily sat on the floor, staring at her shoes with tears in her eyes. Sarah gently told Lily that it was okay, that she would help her try again tomorrow. But Lily didn't want to wait. She wanted to do it now. And so, she did something she rarely did, she asked for her grandfather. Sarah was distraught. She didn't want Henry back into her life. The polite relationship she had was more than enough and she wasn't ready to stretch it. But Lily rarely asked for anything and she couldn't deny her this one request. Within 20 minutes, Henry was there and Lily showed her rare smile. This made it even harder for Sarah to keep hating her father. How could she hate the old man that Lily was so attached to? How could she dislike the one person her special daughter loved? It was moments like these that made all the struggles worth it. Moments where she connected, where he showed her love that only she could appreciate. No one could understand what was special about Henry that made Lily love him so much. Sarah had always believed Henry was trying to make up for hurting her in the past. For his failures and shortcomings. But she couldn't have ever guessed right. Lily was a gift to the world. She was different, yes, but she was brilliant, kind, and full of love. And though the world didn't always understand her, those who did loved her fiercely. She was a light in their lives, a reminder that sometimes, the most beautiful souls are the ones who see the world a little differently. Sarah was a single mother, running her family alone with 2 kids to feed. Rent to pay. Bills to settle. She had to work 2 jobs in order to keep up. And with Lily's condition, she constantly needed a nanny. Despite how fiercely Sarah loved Lily, raising her alone was never easy. She had spent years trying to find the right nanny, someone who could understand Lily's needs. But every single one of them either quit or was subtly pushed away by Lily herself. She never screamed or threw tantrums, no, she simply made it clear, in her quiet way, that she did not want them around. But in the few days that Henry showed up to say hello to the kids or drop by for a birthday, Lily would grin all day and begin to ask for him by name. Granny Henry, and each time she asked, Sarah had a fancy excuse why he couldn't come over. It was all lies. Henry had all the time in his hands. He was retired, sitting alone in his home with nowhere to go, and he longed to visit his grandkids, longed to be a part of Sarah's life again, especially now that Sarah's mother was late and it seemed all they had was each other. Sarah was hesitant. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust her own father. But each time Lily asked, that resolve, that reluctance was slowly fading. Eventually, Sarah was forced to make a decision she never thought she would. She turned to the one person she had spent most of her life running from. Her father. Henry. Sarah and Henry had never had a good relationship. The truth was, their story was filled with wounds, secrets and traumas that had never fully healed. When Sarah was just 18, she made a decision that shattered her family. She sued her own father. What was his crime? Rape. For 7 months, 17-year-old Sarah had been suffering in silence, enduring the kind of abuse that no woman should ever have to face. And finally, she decided to take action. She pressed charges against her own father for raping her multiple times over the next few months. She wanted justice, she wanted to expose Henry for the monster that he was. But justice never came because after a few months, the case was dismissed. Henry walked away a free man, not because he was innocent, but because Sarah's family had convinced her to drop the charges. They told her it was a family matter, something that should never have been dragged into the public eye. And so, Sarah, angry, betrayed, and heartbroken, walked away. She was still a teenager, but her family believed she would heal. She would get over it. My mother was from Thailand. She said she couldn't afford to lose Henry. She said she couldn't support me and my 6 brothers if my father went to jail. I had to drop the case. Sarah narrated her painful story. Silence. That was the corner she was forced into. Henry never apologized. He never showed remorse, he simply continued to be her father, providing for the family. But Sarah couldn't take it. She was traumatized, she was broken, and she couldn't pretend like he wasn't a monster. 2 years later, Sarah left home for college and never looked back. For 12 long years, she stayed away. She built a new life for herself, met a man, got married, and had her first child, Jake. It was only when she was pregnant with her second child, Lily, that she found herself back in the town she swore she would never return to. Shortly after Lily was born, Sarah's marriage crumbled. She and her husband divorced, leaving her alone with 2 children to care for. Jake was old enough to understand, but Lily was different. She needed patience, guidance, and someone who understood her world. Sarah tried everything. Nannies came and went, each one unable to handle the unique challenges that came with raising an autistic child. And so, with no other options left, she agreed to have Henry come over during the day while she was taking her shifts. He wasn't her first choice. In fact, he wasn't even a choice at all. But he was the only person she had left. She expected him to refuse. She thought he would laugh at her, mock her, maybe even remind her of the years she had spent hating him. But he didn't. He simply said, "I'll be there in the morning." And so, Henry entered Sarah's life again, and with that, he was introduced into Lily's life. At first, Sarah was hesitant. She watched him closely, never letting her guard down. But what she saw surprised her. Henry wasn't just good with Lily, he was perfect for her. He understood her silence, her aversion to touch, her love for numbers. And more importantly, he gave her time. He would sit with her for hours, reading the same book over and over again if that's what she wanted. He would patiently explain math problems in a way that made her eyes light up. He never rushed her, never scolded her, never made her feel like she was broken. For the first time in her life, Lily had someone who truly understood her. Sarah watched this bond grow with mixed emotions. First, she felt relief that Lily finally had someone, then she felt gratitude, and then she felt something she never thought she'd feel: regret. Regret for all the years she had spent hating him. Regret for not seeing this side of him sooner. She couldn't make sense of it. All she knew was that, for the first time, Henry was not the monster she had always believed him to be. But Sarah was wrong. Sometimes, a tiger never loses its stripes, and the darkness could be buried so deep within, waiting for the perfect time to peek out and play. And for Henry Yaman, it took 4 years for his true nature to be revealed again. 4 years passed. 4 years of Henry being there for Lily in ways no one else could. He was there when she had nightmares. He was there when she struggled to put her thoughts into words. He was there when she needed comfort but didn't know how to ask for it. And through it all, Sarah found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about him. Maybe people could change. Maybe time really did heal wounds. Or maybe, just maybe, love had a way of breaking through even the deepest of scars. For Lily, Henry was not just a grandfather. He was her safe place. And for Sarah, he was a reminder that sometimes, life had a way of surprising us in the most unexpected ways. Sarah had spent years trying to protect her daughter, Lily. She had fought against a broken justice system, against an unforgiving world, and even against her own past. But in the end, she couldn't save her little girl. She couldn't protect her previous Lily from the hands of an 82-year-old monster that had destroyed her own life 22 years ago and was now back for her little girl. But how did it come to this? How did a mother, so fiercely protective, so desperate to shield her child, end up standing in front of a coroner, identifying her baby's lifeless body? How could the system fail her twice? How could she cry the same tears she'd cried 22 years ago? Only this time, it wasn't just her pain, it wasn't just the pain of being defiled by her own father. It wasn't just the disgust and trauma, it was the maddening guilt of what she'd caused her daughter. A crushing regret that she'd let an unrepentant devil back into her life to steal the one thing that mattered most to her. Her precious child. Lily was just turning 9 years old. Too young to understand the darkness that lurked within humans, too innocent to know that sometimes, monsters don't hide under beds. Sometimes, they sit at the dinner table. For 4 years, Henry had been her safe place. The grandfather who understood her. The only one who could reach her when others failed. Or so Sarah thought. But all of Sarah's worst fears came crashing down on a quiet afternoon. 2 days to Lily McIntyre's birthday. She had just returned from work, expecting to see Lily playing in her room, maybe counting her numbers out loud or reading one of her favorite books. But instead, she found her asleep. At first, she didn't think much of it. Lily often took naps after her therapy sessions. But something felt off. Later that evening, when she went to check on her, she noticed something that made her heart drop. Blood. Staining the sheets. Staining Lily's small pajamas. Sarah was shocked. Lily was just 9. Her cycle wasn't expected for the next few years. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. How does a mother react in a moment like this? Do you panic? Do you scream? Do you break down right then and there? Sarah didn't know. She just knew she needed to get Lily to a doctor. Fast. The doctors ran tests, checking for injuries, asking questions that Sarah couldn't even bring herself to process. And then came the answer that sent her world crashing down. There were signs of forced penetration. There were no traces of DNA. No clear evidence pointing to a suspect. But the damage had been done. They gave Lily medication. Told Sarah to bring her back for a follow-up. And just like that, she was sent home. When they got back, Henry was the first to ask what had happened. She could see the worry in his eyes, the way his voice trembled when he spoke. But Sarah had wondered. Was this real or was it just an act? She wanted to accuse him. She wanted to scream, to demand answers. But she couldn't bring herself to do that. This was the same man who had been helping her pay the mortgage. The man who had spent his retirement savings making sure Lily had everything she needed. The man who had stepped up when no one else would. In her head, she made excuses. She told herself it might have been the neighbor, a boy in school, anyone but Henry. She convinced herself that she was being paranoid. That she was traumatized by her past and seeing things that weren't there. That her father, despite everything, wasn't capable of this. But 2 days later, she would learn that trusting him was the biggest mistake of her life. It all happened on Lily's birthday. March 17, 2024. Sarah had left early that morning for work, promising to come home early to celebrate. When she arrived home after working overtime at the cafe that afternoon, she expected to hear Lily's excited footsteps, to see her little face light up at the sight of her birthday gift. But the house was silent. Too silent. She searched the living room, the kitchen, the backyard. Nothing. Sarah and Henry raised alarm. She went room to room, street to street, calling her name until their voices were hoarse. But Lily was nowhere to be found. And just like that, Sarah's nightmare began. For 6 days, Sarah barely slept. She spent every waking moment searching, calling the police, posting flyers, begging for help. The cops did their job. Lily McIntyre was declared missing in Punta Gorda, Charlotte County, Southwest Florida was thrown into outrage. What had happened to Lily McIntyre? Was she kidnapped? Who would want to hurt such a helpless little girl? But no matter the news, the social media posts, the cries, there was no sign of Lily. And then, on the 6th day, the smell started. A neighbor had called for waste disposal a little earlier than expected, complaining about a strong odor coming from the trash cans behind the apartment complex. When the agency arrived, they found the body. Officers arrived shortly. That's when Lily's body was found. Wrapped up in a polka-dotted blanket that belonged to Henry Yaman, her own grandfather, and stuffed in a trash bag among rotten food and waste. And the real question is, who does the world blame in a moment like this? The mother who couldn't listen to her instincts? The justice system that failed both mother and daughter? Or the monster who had been hiding in plain sight all along? Sarah was broken. She had spent years fearing this man. Years running from him. And yet, she had let him into her home. She had let him get close to her child. And now, Lily was gone. Sarah had tried to fight once. But the system had failed her, her own family had told her to stay silent. And now, she would never forgive herself for listening. But the nightmare wasn't over. On the fabric of the old wooden blanket, they found stains, traces of a substance that no one wanted to believe was there. It wasn't until forensic scientists regenerated the samples using a reagent that the horrifying truth was revealed. The DNA was tested. It was Henry's sperm. There was no more doubt. No more second-guessing. Henry had done this. The man Sarah had let back into her life, trusted with her child. The man she had once feared, but tried to forgive. The man who had taken everything from her. When Henry was arrested, he tried to deny it. But the evidence was overwhelming. And then, the 82-year-old confessed. He'd been molesting Lily for 9 months. He had been there when Lily finally stopped breathing. He claimed he panicked. That he didn't know what to do. So he wrapped her body in his old blanket and dumped her in the bin outside. And his excuse? He didn't want Sarah to overreact. Overreact. A nonchalant justification for his evil act. But Henry wasn't done. When he stood in court, facing the judge, facing Sarah, he said something that left everyone baffled. He looked Sarah in the eye and said that she had wronged him too. He recounted that 22 years ago, Sarah had sued him for rape when she should have hidden a family secret. Henry Yaman described himself as a loving father and that Sarah had ruined his reputation. And now, perhaps, he wanted to hurt her back. So he took Lily. A sweet, innocent child who had genuinely loved and trusted him. Henry Yaman was sentenced to life imprisonment on July 6, 2024. But was justice truly served? Perhaps justice should have been served 22 years ago and Lily McIntyre would still be alive.